Welcome to Tech Talks, hosted by Vision Loss Alliance of New Jersey. Tonight we have with us Jonathan Mosen from Mosen at Large, the Blindside podcast, Mushroom FM, and an advocate for people who are blind or visually impaired. Blind since birth, Jonathan Mosen became known to many radio listeners in Auckland, New Zealand at an early age. He was featured on Talkback Radio before the age of 5 years old. He continued his regular appearances on Radio Pacific until his mid-teens, and while in high school started his own short-term radio station, Radio Enterprise, established by Jonathan to show that blindness was no barrier to working in broadcasting. While at the University of Auckland, Jonathan began his commercial broadcasting career. In 1999, he graduated Victoria University of Wellington, where his thesis reflected on public policy benchmarks for the qualities of opportunities for people with disabilities. In 2010, Mushroom FM was established. This is an internet phenomenon with a high degree of professionalism and a clever use of social media. Alongside his wife, Bonnie, Jonathan began his own company, Mosen Consulting. It provided assistive technology training, produced ebooks and audiobooks, including the popular iOS Without the Eyes series. Currently, Jonathan is the CEO of the Woodbridge, the largest employment agency for disabled people in New Zealand. Jonathan is a recipient of the Vernon Henley Media Award from the American Council of the Blind for his positive representation of people who are blind through the media. In 2019, New Zealand recognized Jonathan's service to the blind community by making him a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. In 2020, he received an Impact Award from the New Zealand Attitude Awards, and in 2021, he was awarded the John A. Horst Champion of Independence by the Pennsylvania Council of the Blind. Jonathan lives in Wellington with his wife, Bonnie, has 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, of whom now are all grown, and he is the proud granddad to a beautiful granddaughter. Tonight's topic, well, it's that time of year again where Apple has released the big update, the iOS 17 update. But before we move on to our presentation, let's review our Tech Talk format for the evening. So in this presentation, Jonathan will be presenting on the iOS update. Please hold your questions until the end, and Jonathan will cue you when it is time for you to ask questions.
Alert. Accessibility shortcuts.
To ask your questions, we ask that you raise your hand. We use the raise your hand feature. For those of you who dialed in, the raise your hand feature is *9. That will raise your hand. *6 will mute and unmute you, giving you the opportunity to ask your question. If you're on a computer, Alt-Y is the raise your hand, Alt-A, the mute and unmute command. If you're using a Mac, use the Option +Y, the keyboard shortcut to raise or lower your hand, Alt+A to mute and unmute yourself. Using the Zoom app on the iPad, top right, select the More option on the top of the screen and flick down to Raise Hand. On the iPhone, this feature is located at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. And now on to our presentation. I'd like to introduce all of you to Jonathan Mosen. Take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everybody from New Zealand on a Friday afternoon where it is supposed to be spring, but in the last few days we've had some unseasonably cold weather. But we're all warm inside, and I'm really glad to have this opportunity to talk with you about iOS 17, the latest operating system for iPhone from Apple. I should say that this is a brief look at what's new because there's actually a surprising amount of change under the hood. And if you go digging a little deeply, you'll find quite a few new and interesting things. We have about 45 to 50 minutes for me to highlight some of those things for you. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in learning about what's in iOS 17 in depth, to check out episode 250 of my podcast. We've done 250 episodes now. The podcast is Living Blindfully. It was rebranded from Mosen at Large in April of this year. The name better reflects what we do on the podcast and the audience that we serve. And there's an extensive look at iOS 17 that goes on actually for well over 2 hours in that episode. That also looks at the new iPhone range. I am demonstrating iOS 17 on an iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I managed to snag on release day. And if you're on the fence, if you haven't done an upgrade for a while and you're thinking, should I upgrade to an iPhone 15 something? I would highly recommend it if you're able, particularly the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, because that has the latest technology from Apple, a newer chip than the iPhone 15, which actually has the same as the iPhone 14 Pro. This is what Apple is doing these days. They're putting the older chips in the cheaper phones to try and incentivize people to upgrade. I am delighted with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's the best iPhone upgrade I've done in a wee while. But the primary reason for that actually applies to the whole iPhone 15 range, and that is the USB-C port. And if you listen to episode 250 of Living Blindfully, you will hear me plugging in all sorts of things into the USB-C port. So the Lightning port that has been a staple of iPhones for over a decade now was proprietary to Apple. And that meant that you had to make sure you had your special Apple cable with you to charge the phone if you weren't carrying a wireless charger around. Now there's a standard USB-C port. Apple hasn't done anything special with this USB-C port, so anything with a USB-C plug at the end will now charge your iPhone. If you've got a laptop charger or some other cable, you can plug it in and charge the phone. What's also really interesting is that you can charge your phone with other phones, and you can also use your phone to charge Apple Watches and AirPods and smaller peripherals. So Bonnie, my wife, has got an iPhone 15 Pro Max as well. It's due to be delivered actually while we do this presentation. So she's waiting at the front door for the doorbell to ring. Now, let's say that we're out and about and her iPhone starts to go a bit flat. If we connect our two iPhones together using a cable that Apple actually does supply, they don't supply the charging brick, but they do supply the cable, which has a USB-C plug at both ends. And I connect my phone, which maybe is on 90%, to Bonnie's phone, which is on 20%. The intelligence of the technology in iOS 17 will look at those two phones and say, which of these phones has the lowest battery capacity at the moment? And it will see Bonnie's is on 20%, mine is on 90%. With the phones cabled together via this USB-C cable, it will then use my phone, which has the greater battery capacity at the moment, to charge hers, which has the least. It's a very cool thing. It's kind of like being able to give someone a jumper lead when their car battery needs a recharge. So it's not going to be fast. It's only sending about 4.5 watts through that cable, but it's better than running out of charge altogether. There are so many benefits of this USB-C port, peripherals that you can connect, like audio gear and Ethernet adapters, all kinds of stuff like this. So I'm really thrilled with the iPhone 15. You've also got the action button on all of the iPhone 15s. This is a new button. It's replaced the ringer switch at the top of your device. So instead of sliding it to turn your phone to silent, there's a button that you can press. By default, it is set to do what the ringer switch always did, toggle between silent and ringer. But you can program that action button to do all sorts of things. And I demonstrate this in episode 250 of Living Blindfully. But let's talk about some other iOS 17 features that are not specific to the iPhone 15 range. And we'll start with accessibility, which is what I've been asked to talk about primarily. One feature that many users who like their speech sounding exactly the way they like will appreciate is that there's much more flexibility for many iOS 17 voices in terms of how they sound. For this demonstration, I'm using the vocalizer Karen voice, so let's take a look at how she can be customized first. Not too surprisingly, to do this, you will double tap the speech settings under voiceover settings, and then you can do this for either your primary voice or for any English voice that you have on your rotor. I've highlighted Karen now, so I'll double tap.
English, Australia, heading. Selected. Karen. Premium.
Now, this is actually quite buried, and some people have been quite surprised when I've pointed out to them that you can do this. So you've now got to double tap again.
English. Australia. Heading.
I'll flick right.
Karen. Download Karen. Enhanced. 157.3 megabytes. Button. Selected. Karen Premium. Using 213.5 megabytes.
Now that's the key message. The actions are available, so I'll flick down.
Speak sample.
We don't need to do that right now because we're hearing Karen speak as we do this demo, but if I flick down one more time,
Open for voice settings.
we can open the voice settings for Karen and indeed for most other voices, and I'll show you a couple of other examples of this. I'll double tap.
Preview settings. Button.
This is actually set focus to the last control on the screen, which is to preview settings. That's handy if you've made a bunch of changes and you want to hear their cumulative effect. You can double tap and do so, but I'm going to go to the top of the screen now by performing a 4-finger single tap on the top half of the screen.
Karen. Back button.
And I'll flick right.
Voice settings. Heading. Timbre. 100. Decrement 100. Button.
I'm a big fan of the flexibility, not a big fan of the user interface that Apple have put together here, because I think it would be far easier to just have a slider so you can slide up and down to control each of these. Instead, you have to find the decrement button to double tap that and decrease, and the increment button to double tap and increase. So let's have a look at what the timbre does. I'm going to double tap.
Timbre. 99. Decrement 9. Timbre. 98. Decrement 98.
So it's a slow process, but I'm going to double tap quite a lot of times.
Timbre. 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 90. Decrement 90.
I paused the recording and double tapped lots of times, and now we can really hear it happening.
Timbre, 67.
I'm kind of curious how low we can go. I'll pause the recording again and keep tapping until I can't tap anymore. All right, it's gone all the way down to 50, and now it sounds like this.
Timbre, 50. Decrement 50. Dim. Button. Timbre, 50. Increment 50. Button.
So it was saying that the decrement button is now dimmed because this is how low it can go. I've quickly pressed the reset button, which has got the timbre back to 100. We can go higher as well.
Timbre. 101.
I'll pause the recording again and we'll see how high the timbre can go and what that sounds like. And on my word, it does sound pretty peculiar.
Reset to voice defaults. Button. Reset to previous settings. Button.
The timbre is set to 200 now.
Reset to voice defaults. Button.
Let's do that. Reset to voice defaults.
Reset to timbre. 100. Decrement 100. Button.
The next control we have in this screen
Sentence pause. 1. Decrement 1. Button.
is the sentence pause option. I find this quite useful because I'm a JAWS user. And JAWS tends not to have a very long pause between sentences, which I appreciate. I can tell from the inflection that a sentence has ended. I don't need myself slowed down by an unduly long pause. So we can turn this down to 0 if we want. If you prefer longer pauses between sentences, you can increase that as well.
Sentence pause. 1. Increment 1. Button. Preview settings. Button. Preview settings.
And there's the preview settings button, so let's just see what happens.
Preview
Hello.
settings. My name is Karen. I am an Australian English voice.
I haven't looked at every single vocalizer voice on the system, but this seems pretty typical of the options available to vocalizer voices. For other non-vocalizer voices, you'll have different options. Let's have a look at eloquence because there is a lot of change there. And I've got read highlighted in my US English voice, so if I flick down,
Speak sample.
Hello, my name is Reed.
I'll flick down again.
Open for voice settings.
And we can open the voice settings, and there's a lot to play with here.
Preview settings. Button.
And now I'll go to the top of the screen
Eloquence. Back button.
and flick right.
Voice settings. Heading. Rate multiplier. 110. Decrement 110.
Some of these parameters have quite cryptic names, actually, so I'm going to take this down a few and we'll see what difference it makes. And actually, to make that more apparent, I will switch to eloquence for this part of the demo so you can hear what's happening. The lowest that this parameter goes,
Rate multiplier 50. Decrement 50. Dimmed.
and we'll
Button.
listen to that.
Reset to voice default. Preview settings. Button. Preview settings.
Hello.
My name is Reed.
So that seems to have slowed the voice down. Let's go to the top end of this one, which is 200.
Rate multiplier 200. Decrement 50. Decrement
And now if I do a preview,
Reset to voice default. Preview settings. Button. Hello, my name is Reed.
so what appears to be happening here is you have your main speed control, which is on the rotor and also in the iOS voiceover settings. And then the multiplier has an influence on that setting as well. In other words, if you've got the multiplier high, then 55 on the rotor is going to be much faster than when you've got the multiplier low. The next option is
Head size 50. Decrement 50. Button.
the head size. And if we take that all the way down,
Head size 0. Decrement 0. Dimmed. Button.
he does have a small head now, doesn't he? If we go down
Reset the voice default. Preview settings.
and preview,
Preview settings. My name is Reed.
if we go all the way up, he's obviously going to have a very big head.
Head size 100. Increment 100. Dimmed. Button.
And if we preview,
Reset the voice. Preview settings. Preview settings. My name is Reed.
we'll reset it to defaults.
Set the voice defaults. Button.
Reset the voice default rate multiplier 100. Rate multiplier. Head size. Head size. Pitch base 65 hertz.
We have pitch base,
Pitch base 65 hertz. Pitch range 30. Decrement 30.
pitch range, which will give you greater inflection,
Pitch range 30. Breathiness 0. Decrement 0. Dimmed. Button.
and breathiness. Let's see what happens if we increase the breathiness of eloquence.
Breathiness 100. Decrement 100. Button. Breathiness 100. Increment 100. Reset the voice defaults. Button. Reset the voice default rate multiplier.
And obviously you can add a little bit of breathiness because that was way at the other end. So if you like your eloquence to sound a little breathy, you can give that a little bit more. You can also adjust.
Roughness 0. Decrement 0. Roughness 0. Increment 0. Button.
Let's increase the roughness and see what it's like.
Roughness 100. Increment 100. Dimmed. Button.
Reset that to default.
Reset the voice defaults. Button. Reset the voice default rate multiplier 100. Decrement 100. Button.
You can also enable.
Higher sample rate. Switch button. Off.
If we do that, this is what it sounds like.
On. Roughness 0. Increment. Higher sample rate. Switch button. On. Phrase prediction. Switch button. Off.
We'll turn that off.
Higher sample rate. Switch button. On. Off.
There's also phrase prediction, which is designed to make things sound a bit more natural.
Phrase prediction. Switch button. Off.
I'll flick right.
Abbreviation dictionary. Switch button. On. Community dictionary. Switch button. Off.
You can disable the abbreviation dictionary, which I will do actually,
Abbreviation dictionary. Switch button. On. Off.
because I prefer to hear actually what's written on the screen, not have my text to speech engine assume it knows what's on the screen.
Community dictionary. Switch button. Off.
There is a community dictionary. You can enable that if you wish.
Preview settings. Button.
And then there's a preview setting. So you can have a lot of fun customizing eloquence exactly the way you like it. Those of us who enjoy customizing exactly what our screen readers say will always celebrate new features in that regard, and there are some to talk about in iOS 17. You can find these new features in VoiceOver's main settings screen and then going to
Verbosity button.
verbosity. I'm repeating it because I'm not sure Karen is saying that very clearly. I'll double tap
Punctuation button.
and flick right.
Customize how punctuation is output. Speak hints. Switch button. Off. System notifications button.
And here we have system notifications. This is something that we're all familiar with. You could be reading a book or a news article and a notification pops up and it interrupts your speech and you really wish it didn't. There was some customization for this scenario before, but now there's a lot more.
Notifications when locked. Heading.
The first heading governs what VoiceOver will speak when your phone is locked and a notification comes in. In my experience, these settings are honored most of the time, but not all the time. I have seen some notifications that come in that don't seem to wake the phone up, and I can't really account for that, but most of the time it works.
Selected. Speak.
This means that if I lock my screen and a notification comes in, it will wake up and speak the notification.
Speak count.
I'm not really concerned with how many notifications there are. That's just verbiage I don't want, so I've unselected that. But if you want to hear that number, of course, enable it.
Selected. Braille.
And I want notifications sent to my Braille display. The final option is,
Do nothing.
so you get no verbosity at all when you get a notification when your phone is locked. And some people may definitely prefer that. I like this setting to be the way I've got it, because I usually use my iPhone with made for iPhone hearing aids, and I don't mind having notifications coming to my ears. But if you use your phone on speaker and your phone is locked, and this thing is unlocking all the time to speak, that could be not only distracting, but actually inappropriate in certain circumstances, so you can switch this off. So all this governs what happens when your phone is in standby mode. If we continue to flick right,
Determines what VoiceOver will output for notifications when your phone is locked.
well, exactly.
Banner notifications. Heading.
And now we're on to banner notifications. These are the ones that pop up at the top of your screen when you've got your phone unlocked.
Selected. Speak.
I have mine speaking.
Selected, play haptic.
and a haptic as well.
Selected, braille.
You can have any number of these selected or not selected. So, for example, your preference could be that you don't want to be interrupted by a banner notification, but you would like a nice haptic to tell you when a notification has come in, so you can tend to it at your leisure.
Do nothing. Determines what voiceover will output when a banner notification appears. Use ring switch, switch button, off. When the ring switch is set to silent, no notifications will be spoken.
While we're in Verbosity, I'm just going to go back.
System notifications, button.
And if we go quite a long way through this excellent screen of customization options, we have something else that's new.
Predictive text feedback, button.
Apple's done a lot with predictive text in iOS 17 to make it smarter. Let's take a look at what VoiceOver can do. We'll double tap.
When predictive text appears, speak, play sound, button.
At the moment, it will speak the prediction and it will play a sound. If we go in here,
Selected, speak. Selected, play sound. Change pitch. Braille. Do nothing.
so you've got quite a few options there. We'll go back.
When predictive text appears, speak. VoiceOver will output predictive text when it appears.
And the next option,
When predictive text feedback is entered, speak. Change pitch, button.
there's an explanation.
VoiceOver will output predictive text when entered.
If you want to make the most of some of the new predictive text smarts that are in iOS 17, this is very useful to know about so that you can get the experience exactly how you like it. One of the wishes that I have had ever since I started using iOS was that there be a way from the keyboard to get to the center of the screen. This is something that I do very regularly in a wide range of apps, such as Leary, my RSS reader, Mona for Mastodon, many applications actually, where if you're reading something and you go to the previous screen and you want to return to that position, often just tapping the center of the screen will get you to your last read position. There hasn't really been an easy way to do this from the keyboard, which has made using the iPhone completely touchscreen free a little bit challenging for a VoiceOver user. Now that has been dealt with, you go into your main VoiceOver settings screen and then go to,
Commands, button.
I'll double tap on Commands,
All commands, button.
and I'll double tap All Commands
Interaction, button.
and flick right
Basic navigation, button.
to Basic Navigation. I will double tap,
Move in, button.
and the one that we want is called,
Move to item at center, button.
it currently doesn't have a keyboard command assigned to it, but if you want to do that, we can double tap
Touch gestures, heading. Add gesture, button.
and flick right,
Keyboard shortcuts, heading. Add keyboard shortcut, button.
and you can double tap and add a keyboard shortcut if you want to. There is a new feature in rotor settings, so I've gone in there now and I'll flick right,
Rotor items, button. Change rotor with item, switch button, on.
and we'll get an explanation of this.
Changes the selected rotor based on the VoiceOver focused item.
On is the default, and it's how it's always worked. For example, if you are in an app and actions become available, the actions rotor automatically gets focused so that you can flick down and perform the actions. If you switch this off, then you would have to manually rotate to the action settings. This could be useful if you have a preference to just keep the rotor the way it is, unless you expressly choose to rotate somewhere else and change it. So those are some of the VoiceOver changes in iOS 17. There are a couple of new notable things where Siri is concerned. One is that you no longer have to prefix the Siri with Hey anymore. If you want Hey Siri back again, you are absolutely able to do that. Let's have a look at this. Siri, open Siri settings.
Settings, reset hidden suggestions, button.
I'll go to the top of the screen
Settings, back button.
and flick right.
Siri and search, heading. Ask Siri, heading. Listen for, Siri or Hey Siri, button.
I'll double tap.
Selected, Siri or Hey Siri. Hey Siri, off.
You can turn listening off completely. If you want the Hey Siri back again, for whatever reason, you're able to set that here as well. Of course, in reality, if it's listening just for Siri, then if you say Hey Siri, it's also going to work. It just ignores the Hey. If you like your Siri to speak with a UK accent, you've got two more choices now. Let's have a listen to those.
Siri voice, American. Voice for, button.
We'll double tap
Variety, heading.
and flick right.
Selected, American. Australian, British.
Choose British.
Hi,
British.
I'm Siri. Choose the voice you'd like me to use.
Now we've got 4 UK Siri voices this time round.
Voice, heading, voice 1, voice 2, voice 3, voice 4,
VoiceOver didn't speak it, but actually it's voice 3 that's selected. So that's one of the new Siri voices. We'll go to voice 4
voice 4,
and try this.
voice
Hi,
4,
I'm Siri. Choose the voice you'd like me to use.
Let's give this a bit more of a workout. Siri, what's the weather today?
Looks like it will be pretty windy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 17 degrees, with overnight lows around 12.
Let's ask the other voice. Siri, what's the weather today?
Looks like it will be pretty windy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 17 degrees, with overnight lows around 12.
There are other settings pertaining to Siri, and they live under the Siri part of accessibility settings. I'm going to take you there now because there's a feature that many of us will appreciate.
speaking rate, 100%, adjustable,
So I'm going to go down.
90%, 80%, 80%,
It goes down to 80%. Let's see what that sounds like. Siri, what's the weather today?
It will be windy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 17 degrees, with overnight lows around 12.
And it goes all the way up to 200%, which sounds like this. Siri, what's the weather today?
Looks like it will be pretty windy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 17 degrees, with overnight lows around 12.
So for those of us who like our speech cranked up, it is good to see Siri offering this feature in accessibility settings. Gradually over the last few years, Apple has been embracing widgets. Widgets first came to the Today screen, which in fact was designed for widgets. Then they were allowed onto the home screen. They eventually made it to the lock screen. And in iOS 17, widgets are interactive, which is a big feature in my view that's going to add a lot of value over time as developers embrace this new concept. What is a widget? Well, traditionally, when widgets got started on iOS, they were bits of information that you could have readily available to you because they were on your home screen. They were a little bit of an app that could appear for you without you having to go into the app. But increasingly, widgets are about more than just providing you with a bit of information. They allow you to interact with an app in some way as well. And this really challenges those of us who've had iPhones for a very long time or who've never really gone beyond the defaults to think about our home screens as more than a static grid of apps. Over the last few versions of iOS, Apple has been acting on its notion of what a new home screen should be like. They really encouraged us to think differently about the home screen when they introduced the app library. Because with the app library, even when you get an app from the App Store, it doesn't have to appear anywhere on your home screen if you don't want it to. You can leave it in the app library and go and look at it if you want to. You can launch it using Braille screen input or Spotlight search or Siri, and it need not ever appear on your home screens at all. Some of us organize our apps by pages. So if you have a few apps pertaining to travel, then you might put them all together on a particular page or two. If you have apps relating to food delivery services like Uber Eats or DoorDash, you might cluster those together. Those of us who really are neat freaks, and I count myself among this group, put our apps into folders grouped by subject matter. I have a blindness folder, a productivity folder, a utilities folder, one full of audio recorders, and so on. And I have hundreds of apps tucked away like that. On page 1 of my home screen, traditionally, I've just had the apps I use the most and that I want available to me regularly. Widgets have encouraged me to rethink this concept because there are so many ways of launching an app. When you think about it, it's a waste of precious real estate to just have this static grid of apps, or at least you can have some apps while also having some information you want to use regularly. For example, on page 1 of my home screen now, I have a widget from the Met service here in New Zealand, and it knows where I am. It's got location services enabled. Right there on the home screen, I can see the current weather conditions for wherever I am, and it's updating in real time as I travel. That's a really nice feature. I have a whole page devoted to travel widgets that will tell me when I'm flying, for example, when my next departure is due, the hotel I'm supposed to be staying at. It's all done from the home screen without me having to go into any specific apps. I use the Overcast podcast app, and I can play recently listened to podcasts from the home screen without even having to open Overcast. I use an app called Broadcasts, and I'm able to play radio stations that I've listened to recently, again, without even opening the app. Interactive widgets are fantastic. They make your home screen come alive. I don't have sufficient time to go into a lot of depth on this, but if it does interest you, there's a full demonstration of this in episode 250 of Living Blindfully. One way that you can make your phone truly yours is to personalize it with tones. You can download tones. There are tones built into iOS, and I actually make all my own ringtones. In iOS 17, there are a lot of new tones, both for ringing and shorter alerts like text messages and other things like that. And they've also remastered some of the other ones, which have been moved into the classic section. These new tones have been generally well received, but there is one criticism coming from some quarters, and that is that the notification sound has changed. The traditional tritone that's been around in various forms forever has gone, and you can't change it back. Some people are saying that the new notification sound, which you'll hear the moment you start to use iOS 17, assuming you haven't already, is way too quiet, and there's nothing that people can do because you can't actually specify a default notification sound. Some apps will let you specify their notification sound, but it's not something that's in the operating system that says, by default, I want all notifications to play this sound. I won't show you all of these because you can have fun playing with these yourself and choosing something that you like, but we'll show you some of them, which you can find under the Sounds and Haptic settings screen, that is on the main settings screen of iOS.
Ringtone, penny, button.
Contacts who call me regularly all have their own personalized ringtone that I've picked and made myself, but my main contact ringtone is this.
Penny.
The piccolo trumpet solo from Penny Lane. I like that. And my text tone is also the beep beep from Baby You Can Drive My Car. But there are lots of new tones that you can choose from. Let's have a listen to some.
Arpeggio, button. Arpeggio.
They're quite modern sounding.
Breaking, button. Breaking.
And the haptics are doing some great things. They feel great when you're getting the haptic feedback.
Canopy, button. Canopy.
So we could go on for a long time with this because there are a lot. I think there are about 20 new tones. So you can play with these. If you want to go through the old ones, as I say, fear not. They're under classic. Some of them are sounding better than ever. There are numerous adjustments to iOS 17's Messages app. You'll come across many of these just in your regular use of the Messages app, but I want to highlight a couple in particular. To show you the first, we'll go into our settings screen and find
Messages, button.
I'll double tap.
Allow messages to access, heading.
This is the standard screen you'll be well used to if you've gone to configure your Messages app before. There is one button I want to spend some time with, though, that is new, and it's this one.
iMessage apps, button.
This allows you to configure the iMessage apps that are visible when you are using Messages. Just as some apps offer widgets, some also offer iMessage apps, but that screen can get very cluttered and you find yourself having to navigate a series of apps that you know you will never use. This has particularly become an issue since with iOS 16, Apple decided to move the audio recording to iMessage apps and offer the ability to record an audio message via an app rather than having a dedicated button that's always visible. I do wish that Apple would take it back to the way that it was, but we have what we have at the moment. So let's have a look in this screen.
Included with an app, heading.
And we'll flick right.
American, switch button, off.
Now these are the apps that I have installed that offer iMessage apps, and I can toggle the ones off that I will never use.
Apple Store, switch button, off. Card Hop, switch button, off.
I'm pretty conservative with my iMessage apps, so you can go ahead and toggle off all the apps that you don't want visible. After that, if you choose to leave the iMessage apps visible on your screen, you'll have a much smaller list. You can still toggle whether iMessage apps are visible or not. We'll show you this as we look at the next big feature I want to highlight in Messages, and this is called check-in. If you're a parent, you've probably said to your kids on numerous occasions, please let me know when you get there just so I know you're okay. But this can apply to a loved one as well, or anyone that you care about. For the check-in feature to work, both of you need to be running iOS 17. So if you're following the steps that I'm about to outline, and you find that it isn't working in the iOS conversation that you've chosen, it could be because the person that you're communicating with is on an older version of iOS. I'm in a conversation now with my nephew, Anthony, who is running iOS 17, and I've currently got focus on the edit field where I can type in my next message.
Message. Text field is editing. iMessage. Insertion point at start.
I currently have my iMessage apps hidden, so when I flick left,
Apps. Button.
there's an add button. If I double tap, it will expand my now, thank goodness, much smaller list of available iMessage apps.
Message. Text field is editing. iMessage. Character mode. Insertion point at start.
I find that focus gets a bit stuck, so sometimes it's necessary to put my finger somewhere else on the screen.
YouTube.
Okay, that's got me unstuck, so I now go to the top of the screen with a 4-finger single tap on the top half of the phone.
Camera.
And we've got the iMessage apps that are visible.
Photos. Stickers. Audio. Location. More.
Now we're going to double tap the More button. That's where we'll get to the check-in feature.
More.
Once again, focus is getting stuck here, but this could be something that is fixed eventually. So I'm going to just tap around the screen with my finger.
YouTube. YouTube. Store. Hashtag images. Check-in.
There is check-in, so it's a little bit difficult to find at the moment, but I found the check-in option under More, and I'm going to double tap.
Back button. Attached app. Check-in. Timer. Around 8:45 a.m. Button.
It is showing me this because I've played with the check-in app before, but if you're seeing something different, that's because the first time you use the check-in feature, Apple will take you through an onboarding process explaining how check-in works. The process tells you that it will automatically notify the person that you're setting this up with when you reach your destination. If you stop making progress while you're on your way, messages will check in with you first to see what's going on. If there's no response from you, I think it waits about 15 minutes or so, the check-in app will start to send information to the person that you've run it with, including your battery level, where precisely you are, and also your cellular status. When you set this up, you do have some control on the amount of data that is shared. You can choose to share only limited data, and that will share location, network signal, and battery level. And if you opt for the full option, it will share all of that, plus the route that you're traveling on, the location that the phone was last unlocked, and the location where the Apple Watch was last removed. So now that we've added this app, we have this button here.
Attached app. Check-in. Timer. Around 8:45 a.m. Button.
You can hear that actions are available from that sound. Those actions are,
React. Remove. Activate.
and that's the default, of course, so we'll activate
Cancel. Button.
and flick right.
Check-in. Heading. Done. Button. When I arrive. Button. 1 of 2. Selected. After a timer. Button. 2 of 2.
There are two scenarios equally important. We've highlighted the one that's most common, I think, which is that you're going to travel somewhere and you have the ability to have someone just monitor your journey, make sure that you're okay, and action being taken if it turns out you don't get to where you need to be. The other one has all sorts of scenarios, and that's the one that's currently selected, actually, and that is on a timer. What have we got now?
Timer. Heading. 1 hour. Picker item.
1 hour.
Adjustable. 0 minutes. Picker item.
And no minutes, so exactly an hour. If you set this and then the phone checks in with you and you don't respond, then it can alert the person that you've set this up with. This could have all sorts of benefits if, for example, you're not feeling well. I can immediately think of something like you've had surgery and maybe you're on some medication and you want to set a timer so that if the phone contacts you and you don't respond, then it will contact this other person who can take any kind of action that might be necessary. So the check-in feature does actually go beyond travel, and it's a very useful one. Be aware of how to use it. You never know when it might come in handy. Next, let's go to the store, thanks to the Reminders app. And I'm running the Reminders app now on my phone. I'm going to perform a 4-finger tap to go to the bottom of the screen.
Add list. Button.
And we have an Add List button. I'll double tap.
Workbridge. Button.
The first question that I'm asked is where I want to create this list, because I'm actually syncing my tasks in Microsoft Outlook with the Reminders app. I do find that very helpful because I have a range of tasks that are work-related that I might want to deal with in Outlook, or I might want to deal with them on my phone, and I can do both. This is definitely not a work-related issue, so I'll flick right.
iCloud button.
And I want to store this in iCloud. Those are the two choices that I have right now. I'll double tap.
Double tap. List name. Text field is editing. Insertion point at start.
I'm going to call this shopping list, and I'll type that in on my Mantis keyboard. We'll just confirm,
Shopping list.
and we'll flick right.
Clear text button. List type. Standard.
VoiceOver is not speaking that this is a button or anything actionable, but it is actionable, and it's critical that we get this right for this demonstration. It's asking for the kind of list. I'll double tap.
Standard button. Groceries button. Smart list button.
And those are the three options. I'm going to flick left,
Groceries button.
back to groceries, and double tap.
List type. Groceries.
Now, if I flick right, we'll see the implications of having chosen groceries.
Organize shopping items automatically using sections.
And this really does work, and I'll show you this in just a moment.
Colors. Red.
Now, if I continue to scroll through the screen, we can choose the color for the list and also the icon. I'm not bothered by those. I will accept the defaults. So I'm going to go back to the top of the screen
Cancel button.
and flick right
New list. Heading. Done button.
and double tap the done button, which will create this list.
Lists. Share list button.
Having created this list, I'm now on a screen pertaining to it, and the first option I have is to share this list. Now, clearly, if I was going to be using this, and actually we'll see how we go, I would share this with Bonnie so that we can both see the list and add to it. I'll flick right.
More button.
If we double tap the More button, we can delete this list, we can sort it, and do a range of other tasks.
Shopping list. Heading. No items. Items added to this list are automatically categorized using sections. Toolbar. New item button.
Let's double tap New Item, and we'll add a few.
New item.
This is a bit unusual, and it makes me wonder whether there are a few accessibility things that need to be tidied up with this app. But I am actually in an edit field, and I can tell that because on my Braille display, the little edit cursor is bouncing up and down. So I'm going to type steak and press enter.
Categorized steak as meat.
Fair enough too. Now I'm going to type oranges. I'm in an edit field again, so I'll just type oranges and press enter.
Categorized oranges as produce. Title. Text field is editing. Insertion point at start.
Let's type something a bit more complicated like dishwasher tablets.
Categorized dishwasher tablets as household items. Title. Text field is editing.
We can't fool this thing. All right, let's type potatoes.
Categorized potatoes as produce. Title. Text field is editing. Insertion point at start.
All right, we would want to buy some kombucha. So shall I type kombucha and see if it knows that? We'll do that.
Categorized kombucha as coffee and tea. Title. Text field is editing. Insertion point at start.
Yeah, okay. I mean, kombucha is fermented tea, so we'll give that one to the artificial intelligence that's making this work. I can keep doing this. I can keep typing items in my list and pressing enter because I have a Bluetooth keyboard, and then we can go on to the next item. But now I'll go to the top of the screen
Lists. Back button.
and flick right.
Shopping list. Heading. Share list. Button. More. Button. Done. Button.
And now flick right.
Steak. Incomplete. In section. Meat.
There are actions available, and also something interesting has happened here. Focus has skipped. If I flick left,
Meat. Expanded. Heading.
the meat section is expanded, but when I flicked right, I didn't hear that. So let's take a look at the options here.
Delete. Rename. Drag item. Activate. Default.
We can delete the whole section if we want to. And if I double tap,
Meat. Collapsed. Heading.
the meat section is collapsed. So it makes it easy to collapse whole sections of products based on the aisle in the supermarket that they're likely to be. I'll double tap.
Meat. Expanded.
And
Heading.
meat is expanded again. And if I flick right,
Steak. Incomplete. In section. Meat.
if I shop online for my groceries or I go to the supermarket and get some assistance to do that, then I can double tap the items and check them off as I shop. I'll flick down.
Delete. Flag. Show details. Edit title. Enter detail.
It's saying enter details, and that's because even though I just sat here and typed steak, oranges, etc., and pressed enter after each one, you can move through and add additional notes. So if there's a particular brand of product that you want, or a particular amount of steak that you want, you can add that in fields other than the title. But my goal was to show you just how quickly you can assemble this list. So let's flick right.
New item in meat, button. Produce, expanded, heading.
You'll notice that now that we have a meat section, you can add a new item to the meat section. But you can also just continue to choose the general new item option, and the software will work out where things need to go. So now we're in the produce section, and we added a couple of things.
Oranges. Incomplete. In section. Produce. Potatoes. Incomplete. In section. Produce.
And I'll flick right.
New item in produce. Button. Household items. Expanded. Heading. Dishwasher tablets. New item in household items. Coffee and tea. Expanded. Kombucha. Incomplete. In section. Coffee and tea.
The beauty and the logic of this is that you and other people in your household, if you have others who share this shopping list, can add items whenever they occur to you. They'll be sorted into the aisles in the supermarket so that when you go and do your shop, all the items are grouped together without you having to do anything. And as VoiceOver said when we were navigating, each of these sections is its own heading. And this is why I'm a big fan of setting up gestures to navigate by heading rather than just keeping headings on the rota. Because if you do this and you're in your supermarket and you can navigate by heading using gestures, you can quickly get to the section of your list that corresponds to where you are in the supermarket. What did I want to buy from the meat section? Navigate by heading until you hear meat, and then all the items are grouped together. This is a pretty cool new feature of the Reminders app in iOS 17. Now I'm going to summarize a range of other things that I won't demonstrate for a variety of reasons, but are still noteworthy. One is one that I'd love to demonstrate, but we have no carrier in New Zealand that offers visual voicemail. So it's not a feature available to me, sadly. It's called live voicemail. If you have visual voicemail, and most people do, it is turned on by default, but you can disable it in the phone app. When someone's leaving you a voicemail, you'll be able to read in real time a transcription of what's being said. This is analogous to the old days of the answering machines, where even if you were home, you could listen on the speaker to someone leaving a message to see if you really wanted to pick up or not. If it is someone you want to talk to, you can pick up right away, interrupt the voicemail, and talk to the person concerned. I can't test this, so I don't know if it's accessible, but I haven't heard that it's not, and I suspect I would have heard if there were accessibility issues. So that's live voicemail in iOS 17. Speaking of voicemail, now if you call someone via FaceTime or FaceTime audio and they don't pick up, then eventually the call will time out and you'll be given the option to leave a video message for them. Apple have announced some changes relating to the way you get data into the phone if you use dictation or the standard virtual keyboard on the device. And it also has some new technology that learns over time how you personally like to write. So the more you use iOS 17, the more useful the autocorrect features are likely to be. And it's not only correcting constant misspellings, it's also making much better effort to guess what it is you're typing. When you hear the word that you want, you can actually now just press the space bar and the rest of the word will be completed. It also says that it's going to try and correct your grammar and common words that are misspelt, such as THERE versus THEIR, affect and effect. It will correct those now. Apple also says that the same AI that's helping it to understand how you write will also over time improve even further how accurate dictation works. Apple has made several improvements to sharing content with people who are close by and even continuing to share when they're not. At least that's coming later in the year. Let's first talk about Name Drop. Name Drop is a new AirDrop feature for exchanging your contact information. It works with iPhone. It'll also work with the Apple Watch if it's running watchOS 10. You can choose specific phone numbers and email addresses that you want to exchange. So if you've got a master contact, for example, and it's got everything, your home address, your home phone number, work information, if you are exchanging contact information with a business associate, you don't want them to have the home details, you want them to have the work details, and possibly vice versa if you're exchanging information with somebody who you know in a social setting. You want to have that kind of granular control, and you do with name drop. There's also a new feature called proximity sharing. It's kind of like name drop, but for files. The way this works is that if you hold your iPhone close to another one, you can set up an AirDrop file transfer, which will let you share photos and other documents with somebody. It will work with videos as well, and they could take a long time. Now, that's where the internet transfer comes in. Later this year, you will be able to set up an AirDrop transfer using the proximity feature and finish it over iCloud if you need to move away from the person. So you can imagine if you're sending a large file like a video or even an audio file, and you just want to start this thing off and walk away, then you're able to do that, and iCloud will take care of the rest. For this to work, both participants are going to have to be signed into iCloud. SharePlay also benefits from this feature. If you are in the same place and you want to share play something, you can now do that using this method of bringing the two iPhones together. This can be useful for a couple of reasons. One is if you use hearing aids or you have difficulty hearing, then being able to play something through SharePlay while somebody else is listening through their device is handy. It could also be handy if you want audio description, but the person that you are sharing this with does not, because that setting is specific to the device. So I can watch For All Mankind with audio description on. If I were watching it with a sighted person who doesn't want the audio description, they can watch it on their device with it off, and we can initiate that process simply by bringing the phones together and choosing SharePlay. And speaking of travel, when Bonnie and I travel together, one of the downsides of AirTags is that we haven't been able to share them. So I've had the AirTags on my account for my suitcase. She's had them on hers if she's traveling with a separate suitcase. And I mean, it kind of works, but it would be nice if we could share AirTags between us. Now you can. So those are just some of my favorite iOS 17 features. I'm going to stop there because I like to try and keep within time and make some time available for comments or questions. You may have some features that you like that I haven't had an opportunity to cover and that you might like to tell us about. So thank you so much for listening. It's always a pleasure to be invited to be here, and I look forward to any comments or questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. So Jonathan is opening the floor to comments, questions. After all that great information, there has to be a lot of questions. Just kind of take a moment and think about it.
If anyone's still awake.
Any questions? Oh, all right, Matthew. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hi, when I went to the Apple store about a month ago to get a new iPad, the Apple person said they want to wait till iOS 17.1. Is that a good idea or no?
It could be, yeah. I mean, whenever there's a really big release of a new iOS, there will be bugs. Software does have bugs, and there are some in iOS 17. I've actually just received the first test version of iOS 17.1, so they are working on it now. And based on what I know of how Apple works, I would think by the end of October, you will have iOS 17.1. So if you want to be super cautious and you don't think that there's anything you absolutely have to have right now, you can always wait, and it might be a bit more stable. It's not super bad, I don't think, but there definitely are bugs.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Another question. Thank you, Matthew. Another question from Sal.
Hi. So I gotta say, that was such an amazing information you just gave us. So my question was, you mentioned that we can sort of charge each other's phone. That's really cool. Is there anything else that we can do with that same cord? Like, for example, pass files quicker than AirDrop, things like that? Or would it be for charging only?
To the best of my knowledge, Apple has not introduced a way of exchanging information between two phones via that USB-C cable. They have, however, allowed you to use a range of USB accessories for file storage. So you can even connect a hard drive and it should show up in the Files app. What I haven't tried, and what I'd like to, is to see if I can get a new USB thumb drive that has a USB-C plug instead of an older thumb drive with a USB-A plug, and I don't have one. And I suspect what would happen is that that will also show up in the Files app. So you could copy your file to that thumb drive on your iPhone using the Files app, and then pass it across to another iPhone 15 owner with a USB-C port. And I think that will work, but I've not had the chance to try that.
Oh, and another thing, I was following along with the steps to creating a voiceover. I found one that said Jester, and I tried it, and it's hilarious. So thank you. I did not know this.
Right. Sorry, I just missed the end of that. Can you repeat that?
Sure. So I was following along with the steps to changing voiceover voice.
Uh-huh.
And I found one that was called Jester. So
Yeah.
I tried it, and I was like, whoa, there's a lot here.
Yeah, they came along, and I believe it was iOS 16, and they introduced what they call novelty voices as well. And there are some that kind of sound a little bit like the old deck talk, but there are some very bizarre voices that you can kind of use as a novelty. The one thing you have to be careful about is that some of the voices are so odd that it can be quite hard to hear to change them back again. So that's a word of warning. If you've got a Braille display, obviously you can follow along in Braille, but it is kind of fun. They have voices that are sounding like they're in space and very robotic and all kinds of fun things.
Yeah, exactly. It's so good to know these things, though, just for
Thank you, Sal. Vincent, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mosen. I listened to your podcast, and you are an extraordinary source of information. Not
Well,
only
thank
that,
you.
but the way you present each topic, you make it very easy to understand in a very complicated world.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and thank you for listening to the podcast.
My question concerns the AirDrop. So if I'm sharing a file and it's a long file, like you said, and I have to leave, you said that it would be continued using through through iCloud.
Yeah.
But would we have to have the same iCloud address?
You don't have to be on the same iCloud account, but you both do need to be on iCloud. So I could be signed into my iCloud account and you could be signed into yours. And Apple knows this, and they kind of behind the scenes set up a transfer between those two iCloud accounts. But if I were to send something to you and I have chosen for whatever reason not to sign into iCloud, then the iCloud transfer won't be available. And that will happen starting in 17.1, which should be sometime late next month.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you can just expand on that. So when I'm using my phone, I am assuming that I am connected to iCloud. Is there a specific setting that I have to make sure that it is on?
It would be highly unlikely that you're not connected to iCloud. Apple makes it pretty hard for you to opt out. So yes, I think it's safe to say you are connected to iCloud, and these AirDrop settings are on by default. If you wanted to switch them off, you would have to go into General and then AirDrop, and you can disable them, but by default they are on.
Okay, that's great. So now the only item to consider is the size of the file that I'm transferring. If it's a heavy file like a video, then the other person that I'm sharing it with would have to make sure that they have enough space in their account.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And
Right.
I've not tried to send something to someone who doesn't have enough space, so I don't know what happens. I presume that it will do a check at the beginning, I hope so, of the file size. And if there's insufficient storage, then it should give you an error, I hope, at that point. But we don't know that yet because this feature is still being developed for 17.1.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vincent. Aaron, you have a question.
One of the cool features that I discovered in iOS 17 is where you can ask Siri to read articles to you on Safari. That's pretty useful.
Yeah, it is. There's some very nice Safari changes that have come out this time around as well. So yes, that is a good one.
And one of the annoying there's one feature, there's another Siri feature that I like, but it's kind of annoying too, is where now Siri's always listening. So you ask follow-up questions without saying the wake word. But the only problem I have is when I if I want to make sure what I told Siri was actually correct. Siri will think I'm asking her a question and interrupt it.
Yeah, it's like a child who thinks you're talking to it when you're not. But the reason, that's a very good point you made, and I'm glad that you've told people about this. The reason why I didn't cover it was because I couldn't get it to work for me, and I've since discovered that it's because if I have my iPhone connected to my mixer here in my studio, or when I'm wearing my made for iPhone hearing aids, I cannot get Siri to behave this way. If I'm using it on the iPhone speaker, it works brilliantly. So just to be clear for everyone else what's happening here, if you're just using the iPhone speaker and probably AirPods, I suspect, this will definitely work. You can ask Siri a question like, what's the weather tomorrow? It will give you the weather forecast. And then right away, you can say, how about on Sunday, without even giving the wake word or anything like that. And Siri will carry on the conversation. So it's much more like talking to a human being now, because as long as you're willing to keep talking back to it, it'll keep talking back to you.
Yeah, the issue I have is picking up voiceover and thinks I'm talking to it.
Yeah.
When I want to hear the text, when I want to see the text, what Siri actually put is correct.
So when that happens, what you can do when you finish talking to Siri is just invoke the home screen. On older phones with the home button, or the SE phones, you can press the home button. Otherwise, you can just swipe up from the bottom to get home, and then Siri will go away and stop listening to you.
Yeah, but that is pretty cool, though.
It is nice.
Thanks, Aaron. Ursula, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. You are amazing. I love listening to you.
Well, you're amazing too. Thank you.
Thank you. When you say, hey, Siri, that has my specific voice, and it only works with me. So will Siri still be the same? Like it'll only listen to my voice? Because my grandchildren try to use my phone and it won't work with their voices. So
No,
is that all?
Yes, that should still be the case. So it should only wake up when you say Siri to it. If you find that it's a little bit more prone to be misrecognizing people, you can turn Hey Siri back on. But what I found is that it's about as sensitive as it always has been to only recognizing the voice of the person who programmed it, who set it up.
Oh, terrific. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Ursula. Questions? Has everyone done the update? Got a quiet crowd here, Jonathan.
No, that's fine. Because I'm going to find out if Bonnie's iPhone has turned up or not, because when it does, guess who has to set it up?
Oh. Well, if we have no questions for Jonathan, I just want to really, Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Great to have you here. And I want to remind everyone to tune in to our VLANJ YouTube channels. So all of our programs are recorded, and then you can listen to all that great information that Jonathan spoke about, because you will have to listen to it again and again and again So it will be on the VLANJ YouTube channel. Remember too, we have a Tech Talks, VLANJ Tech Talks Facebook page as well. So I want to thank everyone for being with us this evening, and happy fall. And all of you stay well, and good night.
Have a good night.
Night,
Thank you
all.
very
night.
Good night, everyone. Be well.
Night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was
Good night,
wonderful.
everyone.
Great.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks again, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.